Sean, we're grateful that you could join us. Mandatory vaccinations for international travelers. Could this impact passenger traffic to Ghana this Christmas?
Thanks for having me, Charles. You know what? I think there is always going to have to be a balance to be found between the economic impact and the public health impact of any protocols that are put in place to combat the pandemic. I don't think that vaccinations themselves are going to have a direct impact in terms of driving down passenger numbers. When we discussed this last year, I think we had mentioned that, Africa will be behind the curve and it's probably going to be around 2022 before mandatory vaccinations become reality in Africa. And I think Ghana is one of the first African countries now who are taking the step with vaccines pretty much available to anybody who wants them now in most African countries. This is not something that, that is going to drive people away who want to travel, but who are unable to access the vaccine. So I think that the people who are planning to travel are already vaccinated or have access to the vaccines. And I think it's actually something which will help boost the safety rather than drive down the numbers.
Great. We can talk about the Omicron variant and its resultant travel bans. What must be the concerted response from Africa's aviation industry?
Well, I think that the travel bans against many African countries, and it is primarily African countries who are being hit with these travel bans over Omicron, are quite ridiculous. In a lot of cases, these travel bans are being imposed by countries which have higher rates of infection of the Omicron variant themselves than the countries upon which they are placing the bans. There is a question which I think needs to be asked, whether these countries are doing this with any scientific justification or whether they are simply doing it because they can pick on Africans easily, and that allows them to, to make a political point to their domestic audience that, look, we are doing something. So I think it's very shameful that a lot of these countries, the US, the UK, the EU, for example, who have placed bans on African countries, even though some of these African countries do not even have cases of the Omicron variant.
We do know that, your country, Malawi, and other African countries are, towing the same line when it comes to the new travel regulations. Passengers who come in without vaccines get mandated to have a vaccine in that regard. But how much, tightened measure is much more of a restriction, if we could put it that way, for international travelers?
Well, there are two tools at our disposal to combat the spread of the variants when traveling. One of these is testing, and one of these is vaccination. I think a lot of African countries led the way in terms of using testing as a means to be able to prevent transmission of spread through travel. And now that vaccination has become so widespread across the African continent, or at least access to vaccination has become widespread throughout the African continent, it is the next logical tool. Remember, most African countries already have very strong vaccination programs and have mandates of vaccination for things like yellow fever to enter them anyway. If you show up at Accra or at Lilongwe without a yellow fever vaccination, you will be sent to Port Health and forced to take the vaccination right there. This is no different. COVID is going to become endemic, similar to the way yellow fever has in parts of the world. And there's no reason why a country should have to let somebody in who is not willing to take the appropriate public health measures, such as taking a vaccination, in order to enter their country.
And of course, we shall stay with this shortly to give you updates in our subsequent bulletins on how the entire regulations come in effect from tomorrow go. Sean, we're grateful that you could join us, and we're grateful once again for your thoughts on this story.